my name is Madeline and welcome back to my channel, Cozy Cottage Chapters, and welcome to my video on the best books I read in the year 2024. I feel like I really discovered my reading taste and preferences and really refined what books I like to be reading this year. I think that's really evident in my favorites list because so many of these are books that I think will be, you know, top lifetime favorite books, books that I can see myself coming back to and rereading over and over again, books that stay in my mind months and years after reading them, which is the goal. I want to be reading books that affect me and make me reflect for a long time, and not just books that I forget a day after I finish reading them. So I'm really quite happy with that. Even though there aren't necessarily a lot of books on this list, I really narrowed it down to the books that I just absolutely adore, that I keep thinking about, that I would highly recommend. I have a list of 4, I believe. Let me check. Okay, I have a list of 3 honorable mention books and then 9 firm favorites. I'll go through the honorable mentions first. First up is A Trick of Spades by Tasha Kazanjian. This was put out by Owl's Nest Publishing. This is my first book that I've read from them, but they are a small publishing house that mainly does middle grade, but this one is a teen fantasy story. Lots of mid-century modern kinds of vibes to it. We're following these twins, a boy and a girl, who basically set out on this expedition to help their aunt who is in some trouble with kind of a mob-like situation. It takes them around the city and it's just a lot of fun. We get the story told from alternate perspectives from each of the twins. Each of the chapters alternates, and I just really enjoyed it. This is the author's debut novel. I highly recommend this to teens who are looking for something that is not YA and filled with sometimes all of the not so great stuff that YA books sometimes have. So yeah, I would highly recommend this one. My next honorable mention is Silas, Marner by George Eliot. I read this for Victober this year and I really enjoyed it, particularly the last 60 pages of the story. The first bit I was not honestly very interested in. I was getting kind of lost in the story, not super engaged with it. But once kind of that turning point hits, and I think it's really the last 60 pages or so, I was so invested in the story. I could not put it down until I finished it, and I just loved so much the evolution of Silas's character. We really get to see him growing, and without giving too much away, because it is kind of a short book, we see kind of the power that a child has, and it can bring, and the happiness and joy and love that a child brings to those around it was so beautiful to read about. And I think just especially with the season of life I'm in, having now a young toddler, I just enjoyed so much reading this book, and it made me reflect and think about my own life in so many ways. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed Silas Marner. It's worth pushing through the beginning, which is a bit of a slog in my opinion, to get to a really rewarding end. And then my final book in this honorable mention category, and really this is a series, and I've only read the first 3 books, but I will include all of them for the purposes of this, and that is Wormwood, Abbey by Christina Baehr. I've talked about this series quite a bit, I feel like, already. It is historical fantasy. There are dragons. It's set in England. I thought it was during the Victorian period, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But anyways, books are so much fun. They are so cozy. They are not very heavy on the fantasy, which I appreciate because I'm not a huge fantasy reader. And yeah, I have just been enjoying getting to know these characters, getting to spend time in the setting. And there are 2 more books left for me to read, and I am looking forward to finishing that series. Right, now on to my firm favorites. I said I have 9 books in this category, and these are all books that I just loved so much, gave 5 stars to. I think they are perfect and beautiful and wonderful, and I love them so much. First up is Persuasion by Jane Austen. I read this summer and have had nothing but good things to say about it since, and I feel like I still think about this story pretty regularly, which is a really good sign to me that it is in that top tier of books for me. I'll read you the back of this one because I feel like it summarizes things pretty well without giving anything really away. So the quote is, "I am half agony, half hope." And then the summary says, "Anne Eliot lost the love of her life 8 years earlier, and the sorrow lingers on. Yet the dashing Captain Wentworth did not desert her. It was Anne who rejected him, because she was persuaded that she could make a better match. She never did. Suddenly life deals them a second chance. Anne and Wentworth meet again on the social circuit. He acts coolly and even openly courts a younger woman, yet Anne remains painfully alert for the slightest hint that their love might be rekindled." So I really adored this kind of second chance romance trope in this book. I thought Anne was such a mature and interesting heroine. The way she takes care of her family and friends and other people in her life is just so beautiful, because in so many ways these people are not very great to her. Her family treats her really terribly, but she is just constantly pouring out love and helping them and being kind to them, even when they don't always deserve it. And I loved Anne so much. I was rooting for her, and this book was really great. Stuff in a totally different kind of book, and that is Interior Freedom by Jaques Philippe. This is Catholic nonfiction spiritual reading. I'll read the back. I might read the back of all of these. Despite the most difficult situations that can restrain our physical movement, each person has deep inside a place of freedom that no external power can take away, because God himself is its source. A person wins inner freedom to the extent that he connects to its source, God himself. By practicing the virtues of faith, hope, and charity, these theological virtues are the center of the spiritual life. As the basis for interior growth, they become the source of the glorious freedom of the children of God. So this book is very short. It's 130 pages, and the font is very big and the pages are very small. But there's just so much depth and so many things that I just had to slow down, reread, think about. And I really want to read more of Jaques Philippe because he has a number of books that he's written. Most are kind of all about this kind of interior freedom kind of theme, but I'm eager to explore more of his work. I really enjoyed this. I read this at the beginning of the year, still think about it a year later, so this was really amazing. Alright, next up is a book I talked about in my December wrap-up. I actually have 2 books from my December wrap-up that made my favorites list, which is pretty impressive. And the first is The Vanderbeekers of 141st Street. This book is so charming. We follow the Vanderbeeker family. They have 5 kids. They live in Harlem in New York City. And it is a couple of days before Christmas, and they've been told by their landlord they have to move out after Christmas or on Christmas, something like that. And the Vanderbeeker children are so upset. They love their home, they love their community, and they will do whatever it takes to stay in their house. And they take it upon themselves to try to convince their grumpy landlord that he has to let them stay. This is such a sweet story. I love the sibling relationships. I love the whole family dynamic, the parents, the community. There's just so much joy and love in this book. And it is the perfect read at any time of the year, but especially in December. I'm eager to read the rest of the Vanderbeeker books, and I hope this will be kind of a series that I love and enjoy, and that the rest of the books will be as good as this first one. I have Rilla of Ingleside by Montgomery. I finished the Anne series this year, which was very exciting and a nice accomplishment because I read Anne of Green Gables for the first time when I was pregnant. So I was really happy to be able to wrap up this series, and I adored Rilla's story. This is such a great book. Rilla starts off I think she's 15 or 16 at the beginning of this book. And she is kind of immature. She really just wants to go to parties and have a good time and dress beautifully and get the attention of a young man and those kinds of things. But then World War I breaks out and she is forced in many ways to mature and grow up. And she does. And it's just so beautiful to read about her development. And yeah, there are some sad things that happen in this book. Obviously, it takes place during World War I. There's a lot of sadness, but Ellen Montgomery handles it in such a kind and tender way where you know you're going to be brought to the other side and you're not just going to dwell in the sadness, that there's going to be hope again, that things will be okay for the characters. And I really appreciate that about her writing, that she could take you through hard things but deliver you to the other side, is really, really nice. There are scenes and moments in this book that made me laugh, made me cry. I still remember many things about this book, and it is definitely one of my favorite books in the Anne series. I don't think it is my favorite, but it's definitely among my favorite. And then my last physical book before I get into my ebooks that I read is, of course, Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. I feel like a broken record at this point because it has been months now of me talking about this book, because it took me several months to get through it because it is huge. But it is so, so worth it. I loved this story so much. I dipped in and out of an audiobook and physically reading it, which was the perfect way for me to enjoy this story. I will read you the back to summarize it instead of trying to do that on my own. So a devastating depiction of a man imprisoned by his own pride, Dombey and Son tells the story of a dysfunctional family. At its head is Paul Dombey, who runs his family as he runs his firm, coldly, calculatingly, and commercially. The only person he cares for is his little son, while his motherless daughter, Florence, craves affection from her unloving father, and his defiant second wife, Edith, rebels against him. There's so much about this book I love. In fact, I made a whole video about it. So if you want to hear about Dombey and Son, you should check out that video. But suffice it to say, this is a firm favorite, and I'm excited to read more of Charles Dickens and see kind of how this compares to his other works. But I have a feeling I'm still gonna love this so much. Now I have a couple of Kindle books that I read. And the first is In This House of Brede by Rumer Godden. This story follows a woman who is kind of at the height of her career in a time when women didn't really have careers and certainly weren't like the bosses. And she leaves everything behind to go join a convent, to be a Benedictine nun, a cloistered nun. And we follow her, we follow the other women in this convent, the other nuns, their relationships with each other, their struggles, their daily life in the convent. And I loved that so much. This is a very quiet, very contemplative book, but I found it to be so fascinating. I loved these women so much. They're so interesting and so different from one another, and it felt just so real to me. It's a book that is very deep and is one I would definitely want to reread because I feel like I got a lot out of it the first time, but I know that there's even more that I maybe didn't get. There were moments in this book that brought tears to my eyes, and I just really, really enjoyed it. And again, Rumer Godden is another author I want to read more of, hopefully this year. Then I have a middle grade, and that is The Star That Always Stays by Anna Rose Johnson. This is middle grade historical fiction, I think in the 50s. I could be wrong about that. It takes place in Michigan, and we are following this girl, Norvia, whose parents are divorced, and her mom is getting remarried, and she's going to now have some step-siblings and all of that. We're following kind of her changing family dynamic, but also her and her kind of growth and character development as she's kind of coming into herself and figuring out who she is, and her hopes and dreams and aspirations. She wants to be a writer. I loved so many things about this book. It is such a sweet story. I loved Norvia, her family, her step family as well. I just highly, highly recommend it. This to me is kind of the top tier of middle grade historical fiction. It felt so cozy. It felt like reading a classic book, and I just loved it so, so much. Changing gears completely, a totally different kind of book, and that is Jurassic Park by Michael Creighton. I'm really surprised that this book made the list, but also not, because I had such an amazing reading experience with this book. I could not put it down. I remember sitting in the dark as my daughter was sleeping, unable to stop reading this book on my Kindle, and I just kept turning the pages so quickly because I needed to finish it. I was completely captivated by this book. I gave it to my dad for Christmas, and he read it in a couple of days and also really enjoyed it. Says that the book is definitely better than the movie. I haven't seen the whole Jurassic Park movie, but I believe that it is better than the movie. I won't say too much about it because I feel like everyone kind of knows what Jurassic Park is about, but the book was so good. It is violent, some, cursing involved, which, those things are not my favorite in books. I typically really don't like that. But in the setting of Jurassic Park, it made sense. It felt believable and okay, and I didn't really have a problem with that because, because they're being chased by velociraptors, and, you can make some allowances in these circumstances. But yeah, I think I had to skip maybe 1 or 2 passages that were just very violent and graphic. But other than that, I really, really enjoyed this book, and I feel like I had to put it on this list because I just had such an amazing reading experience with this book, and it stands out in my mind as kind of my top reading moment. And then my last book on this list is A Game of Hearts by Joanna Barker. This is a Regency era historical romance, and I discovered this year that I really like historical romance and historical mystery, that maybe contemporary romance, contemporary mystery is not for me, and I prefer the historical side of things. So that was really exciting and kind of a new development. But this is such a nice historical romance where we follow Marigold and, I'm forgetting his name, Tristan, I think. Tristan, yes. Marigold and Tristan, they are rival archers who are competing against each other. They're both like kind of at the top of the game in this town, but they're also like childhood, I don't want to say friends. Their parents are friends. They grew up together as children, but they've hated each other their entire childhood for various reasons that we explore in the book. We see them kind of, challenging each other in archery, and this is a true enemies to lovers romance. We really get to see the progression from them hating each other and like hating each other since childhood. This has been like a long time, and slowly growing to, you know what, maybe the other person isn't so bad, we can be friends, to more than that, and falling in love. I enjoyed this book so much. The scene where they're finally kiss was so sweet and so swoon worthy. It's probably like in my top tier of moments in books. And yeah, I am so surprised that I enjoyed this book as much as I did. I read the second book kind of in the series, a duology, I guess. I enjoyed that one, but a little bit less than this first one. This first one to me was just absolutely amazing. I loved it so, so much. I want to read more Joanna Barker, and I want to find more books, more romance books that kind of make me feel the way I felt in A Game of Hearts, because I enjoyed it so much, and it was so sweet and so heartwarming. Alright, so that is it for my favorite books of 2024. Like I said, it was a fabulous year. I read some really fabulous books. I'm really looking forward to 2025. You'll have to let me know below what some of your favorite books of the past year were, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye!